You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast. My name is Andrew Mackay-Smith, and this is my conversation with a fellow called Liam Bray. He's a member of the band from Brisbane called Leichhardt. The reason for the conversation is to promote Leichhardt's newish LP called Gateway Nights. Let's have a listen to what Liam has to say. Here we go. Liam, Andy Mackay-Smith calling. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, mate?
Oh, I'm very good. I've been looking forward to our chat because Lee has certainly been giving you guys a bit of a good leg up.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good to hear, old Leroy.
How do you guys know each other?
Mate, we used to work together at Woolies back in the dark old ages. It must have been in the mid '90s, late '90s or something, I think, when I was a wee whippersnapper.
Yeah, it's a bit like that, isn't it? And you guys have been going, he tells me, this is your first album that you've released.
Yeah.
You guys have been going for about 15 years or so, or possibly longer.
But, mate, I think we started in 2002. Yeah, 2003. Somewhere around that mark. Sean and I first got together. We were both playing in different bands and had some mutual mates in Halfway, and got together that way, just sharing a few beers back. Yeah, it must have been about 02, 03, somewhere around that.
Yeah, gotcha. So you've certainly played all of the venues.
We're not exactly a hard-working band.
Yeah, but maybe that's the secret to career longevity there. Maybe that's the elixir.
Yeah, quite possibly. Quite possibly. I think it's a pretty good effort that we're all still speaking to each other, to be honest.
Well, Lee might have mentioned I'm a musician, and I can tell you, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's bloody hard in bands. I mean, the personalities that get involved. I don't know. I don't think it's specific to musicians, right? It's a human thing, right?
Yeah, it is a human thing. Yeah,
you're in closer quarters, but the problem is you're in closer quarters when you're in a band. So the differences can become exacerbated. That's been my experience.
They do, and but it's been a pretty cool, 15 years or whatever. We've just we haven't tried to do anything that, or try to be anything we're not. You know what I mean? We're never doing it to try to make a record or to do. We just did it because we wanted to hang out and have a few beers, and we all shared a sort of loose sort of musical sort of appreciation, if you know what I mean. And we just kept rehearsing and kept writing songs and getting a few gigs here and there. And we sort of never, we never said we're going to be bigger than the Beatles to quote unquote. So it's been a lot of fun, that's for sure.
Well, let's talk about the album because, look, I'm a local, so this photo has a lot of significance to me that's on the front cover of your album. It's called Gateway Nights, of course. So what's the significance of the bridge and, indeed, the photo to the music?
Yeah, well, the album's called Gateway Nights, and that's there's a track called Gateway Nights, and that's a song Sean wrote the lyrics to, the singer, which is just telling a story about when he used to live in Rocky and used to drive back down to Brisbane to see his family and stuff. And it's he grew up, when he was back in Brisbane, he grew up over on that sort of eastern side of town and has always lived over that part of the world. So it's pretty much just a story of him sort of coming in and out of town, and a bit of what's the word? Just a
bit of nostalgia, I suppose, attached to it.
Nostalgia, that's the word I was looking for. Sorry,
that's all good.
A bit of nostalgia around there, and then they built another one, and there's a line, there's a line in the song about they built another one right beside it. So, there's that, and plus just that whole sort of Brisbane thing. We're all from Brisbane. We've always played in Brisbane, worked in Brisbane. Brisbane, gets ragged on a fair bit, but it's not a bad little city to live in and grow up in, And then, I always had the idea of a sort of photo of us down by the bridge, sort of. And originally we did a photo shoot during the day, and then sort of Sean said, well, why the bloody hell have we got a daytime shot of the bridge when the album's called Gateway Nights? And, So Steve Booth, who did the photography and everything, sort of said, yeah, that's a pretty good point. So he tried a bit of Photoshoppy sort of trickery at first, and it just didn't quite sort of, like, it looked really cool, but it wasn't sort of what we sort of wanted. And then he went back and took that sort of great shot, at night, one night there under the bridges there. So yeah, it's come up pretty well,
Well, I for one had no idea, because I've never been under it, that there were those coloured lights, those nice coloured lights underneath, and you're right, you go.
Neither did I. Yeah.
There they are, though. And look, the story you just shared there about your singer and lyricist echoes my experience too, because, look, I don't know how many times I've traversed over the bridge, but I've travelled God knows how many times between the Gold Coast and the Sunshine Coast. And I've lived and worked in both locations, and the bridge was always, I don't know how to describe it, but it felt like as though it's rite of passage. I don't know. That doesn't quite describe it, but there was an anticipation of where you were going to or coming from.
Yeah. And I think that song, Gateway Nights, is a bit of that. It's a bit of that nostalgic sort of, where are we going or where have we come from? You know what I mean? And yeah, I think I know what you mean there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was if I was coming, depending on, I live closer to it. We live on the northern Gold Coast. We've got a place on the Sunshine Coast, though, and I've worked a lot in both locations, as I said. So when I was driving back from the sunny coast, it meant that it was only 40 minutes or so to go before I could grab a beer or a Jack Daniels. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, exactly what you mean.
And when I was going north, it always meant, well, you're getting ready to go to work. Then I used to be able to time it and make my phone calls, of course, on my hands-free kit in the car.
Yep.
All of this sort of stuff. So the bridge is just a reference point for me, and I always loved shooting left. Or right, depending which way I was driving, of course, but just looking at the city nightscape at in the evening, because Brisbane is a beautiful city and it doesn't get its just due. I know people down south sort of think we're hicks or what have you, but it's a beautiful city, it's an evolving city and growing city, and if you spent a long time here, it's a city that starts to open up to you.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So I agree.
The album, the sounds on the album. Now, I was trying to think of some musical references, and I came up with two, so bear with me. I could be completely off the mark, but I love doing this, okay? So I came up with some of the more upbeat moments from the Drones, but then the other reference I got was the Go-Betweens.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so not just because they're a Brisbane band, it could be a bit of that seeping into my consciousness, and I know how we love the Go-Betweens here in Brisbane. We've even got a bridge named after them in our city, right?
Yeah, true.
But I found particularly Cattle and Cane and that sort of lo-fi laid-back aspect of their sound. Grant McLennan, I think his name was, the way he wrote songs, it was that laid-back nature. And you guys, I haven't dived deep into the lyrics because I've been listening to the album over Bandcamp, so I haven't been able to listen to it in the car and that sort of thing. But what I've been able to do is come up with those two musical, those signposts, if you like. So am I on point there, or am I a bit far away from?
Oh, look, no, I think it's sort of relatively close to the mark. None of us are sort of massive, sort of go-between, sort of train spotters or anything like that. They're kind of one of those bands that everyone sort of does sort of reference. Like, I never saw them live. I think I've got one album of theirs. I think it's a best of. And the Drones certainly were a band that we all sort of, around that same time, we sort of, heard on the radio and probably saw a couple of gigs. So it's probably not far off the mark. Like I said, we probably, we all sort of have a pretty loose sort of similar sort of taste in music, which will probably, it's pretty cliche, but stems back from a lot of the old stuff that all our folks were listening to, when we were growing up. So we've all got pretty good record collections that have most probably been handed down by the oldies, So bands, with just bands like I always use probably a band like CCR as a bit of a
okay, gotcha.
just
I can hear that.
Cool to say that. It's not cool to say that, It's a lot cooler to say an indie, some sort of indie band or something. But you know what I mean? Just that easy sort of, rock and roll that's, sort of easy to listen to. I know what you mean, though, with that sort of, easy sort of feel, carefree sort of feel.
Yeah, it was that. It's actually I'm going to call it as I see it. It's actually a bit of a Brisbane sound you've got, and I'm going to take that as a compliment, please. Because you're a resident, you've grown up here. But the other band that I was thinking of is Beasts of Bourbon. And
okay.
and they're a Brisbane band, of course, and so you've got this. It's an average person would go, that sounds like country music. But if you understand the three bands that I've mentioned and the way that they lean into some of the more country elements of rock and roll, that's where you guys are coming from. That's what it sounds like to me.
That's pretty, I think that's pretty spot on, We just, to be honest, I remember playing a gig years and years ago, not far after we first started, and we were playing up at the Troubadour, and we were playing with a band from South Australia or something like that, and they're like, oh, that was a good set, we thought you guys sounded like the Replacements. Well, I had to go back and find out more about the Replacements because to be honest, I didn't really know who, didn't know much about them, and so it's interesting how different people hear different things and get different things out of the sounds and that. But
it's always in the ear of the beholder, really, isn't it?
Yeah. But certainly we, like most of the songs, I sort of write the music. And then a couple of other fellows do a couple as well, and Sean writes most of the lyrics. So it's sort of, there's no sort of set formula, but just sort of whatever works in the rehearsal room,
And I particularly like the fact that you've offered the album on vinyl, on 180 gram vinyl. I think that's really important because, again, I think your music is referencing all of those bands again. It's music that is really suited to that medium there. And I know people go, oh, you're just being an edgelord, it sounds the same on an MP3 or FLAC or whatever. No, it doesn't. I'm sorry, it doesn't. It sounds very different if you're attuned to it. You've got to be attuned to it and let it...
Yeah, I agree. And that was a big thing that I wanted to do. We've been playing in this band for, like I said, 15 years or so. We've all got record players. I think most of us do. We've all got a record collection. I had an uncle that I didn't really know, but he played in a band back in the 70s and stuff, and I love the fact that there's vinyl out of his band, you know what I mean? So I sort of I pushed pretty hard for us to do the vinyl. There's going to be a lot of vinyl sitting around in our houses for the next 50 years, because we're not exactly selling it like bloody hotcakes, but it was something that I really wanted to do, and to be honest, we all wanted to do, just to have that, in this day, it would have been easy just to do the whole just digital, people can download it if they want, Spotify, all that sort of stuff, but I think there's still something really cool about, and even the CD, holding that, flipping through the liner notes, not that they're a huge part of this album, but just having those little things, and in the vinyl, I'll have to give you a copy. Have you got a record player? You got a record player?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I love it.
I'll have to get you a copy. I'll have to get you details, and I'll send you down a copy. And just even the insert for the vinyl is just one side, just liner notes and a few things, and then the other side's just a whole collage of different photos of us, rehearsing, recording, a few old ones back in the day, and I think there's something still really cool about actually having that physical product,
Well, the other thing too is...
Sort of makes it more real or something, in a way.
Oh, and it does, and it's a way of relating to people, and what I mean by that is I've got two young girls, and both underneath the age of 5, and we get into cassettes together as well as at records, LPs, so... What I do is I get them, it's actually a participating thing, because if you've got kids, mate, you'll know it's bloody hard to get them away from screens and devices. Let me tell you, it's almost, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but you're fighting a losing battle a lot of the time. And I'm trying to get them to understand, okay, they got 2 cassette players and 1 cassette player in their bedroom each, and they pick which tape goes on when they're going to sleep, that sort of thing. And with vinyl, I say, okay, what do you want to listen to? And they're fascinated by the album cover art. And exactly what you've picked up here is really important. I really appreciate the fact that, I can grab a copy actually because, they travel over the bridge with me all the time. So this is an album cover that has something that's relative to their lives.
Yeah.
And that's what music is about. It should be all encompassing. It shouldn't just be this disposable thing that's, I'm not saying it always has to be that way, but I think if you're a musician and you really like to get into music, you want to have the option of it being something that's you can touch, hold, and feel, and you can look at too.
Yeah, I agree. And the same thing. I got two little boys. I got two boys, 2 and 3. But we have like little music sessions where like on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, I'll put a record on. Even Thomas, when he was first born, he was like 8 weeks or something. We'd lie in the lounge room. I'd put on a Led Zeppelin record or a Beatles record or Bob Dylan or whatever, You and I or Oasis, and talk to him, and listen to it. And not that he at 6 weeks old or 10 weeks old or 1 year or 2 years old understands what's going on, but just exposing them pretty much like I was. You know what I mean? Like my earliest memories, I listened to Dad's record player, Mum's cassettes, those sorts of things,
Agreed. Yeah, it sounds likewise.
AM radio, so trying to get that, for the kids, they might not grow up being into music or that, but just giving them that exposure to different things, like you said, not just ABC Kids and Peppa Pig,
and Kinder Surprise Eggs unwrapping on YouTube. Yeah, there's so much crap out there these days that they're exposed to. And look, I do get concerned about the impact of social media, not particularly in my life because I've got discipline around it, but around the kids' lives. I mean, there's so many instances where kids have fallen into all sorts of strife because of social media, and it's just a way of giving them options to be entertained away from bloody screens as well. I think it's a really pertinent way of looking at it too. So anyway, I'll diverge topics and I'll say I'll ask this question: the band's name. I'm fascinated by it because my team is the Tigers, and of course Leichhardt Oval's down there in Sydney. So is it a reference to that potentially?
Well, it's funny. It's funny you should say that because I'm the biggest one-eyed Balmain supporter, and obviously now West Tigers supporter. But as a kid, just mad one-eyed Balmain supporter. Growing up in the 80s, Gary Jack, Benny Elias, Blocker, all those guys. But it's not actually a reference to, I didn't come up with the name. Sean came up with the name. And he tells me it isn't a direct reference to Leichhardt Oval. It's just more the story about Leichhardt the explorer and his sort of ill-fated sort of journey through Queensland and what it opened up, and kind of links in with the sort of album title as well and that sort of whole feel. And, the fact, I think there's part of the story with him that when he went on that final expedition, he didn't have enough certain supplies, but he had some ridiculous amount of rum, or something, like didn't take certain things that he really needed, but had an absolute bucket full of rum.
Sounds like a typical Queenslander, though.
Yeah. And then the fact that, that they opened up more of Queensland in the search for Leichhardt than, so that's sort of where I think Sean got the idea from, and wanted a sort of non-the band, and that was sort of, like 2002, 03, there was all those, the Strokes and, there was a few others around that time, so that sort of one word band name sort of struck, and it just stuck.
It's a great name. So, it's
it is a good name. It is a good name, especially when people spell it wrong because they miss the double H.
I did the same thing. It took me a few goes to find you on Facebook, but when I went and looked at it and thought it's not like the suburb name or the oval name in Sydney. It's the guy's name. Yeah, and then I found it. So but that's it's a great story actually, and it's nice that you've got that association with it yourself.
Yeah. It's a cool story, Leichhardt and all that. So, and there's a subtle reference there to the Mighty Tigers as well. I can claim that.
So, mate, when can we watch you play and perform?
We haven't got much on at the moment. There's a couple of things coming up later in the year, a couple of support things that haven't been announced officially, but that's going to be pretty good from when that's officially announced. So at the moment, there's not too much on the short-term horizon, unfortunately. If we could have done this, or should have done this week ago, we played at Rick's on the weekend.
I've seen the photos. How'd you go at Old Rick's?
So that, yeah, mate. Oh, look, you know, it's it's perfect for a band like us, mate. You know, you get 20 or 30, you know, friends and family down there having a few beers and a good time. You know, no, it was really good actually. It was probably one of the better gigs we played at Rick's because it's, you know, it's a lot different to the sort of Rick's that you know, back in the
it's different from 15 years ago. Well, that's true though. I mean, 15,
you know,
even that 15-year ago period, probably at our prime of going out. Yeah. I mean, it's you're a musician, I'm a musician, but I play covers, so quite often us on stage will be the oldest people in the room by about 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's, you sort of think, shit. Not that it's a young person's game doing this going out thing, but the Valley in general, it's not that it's changed. It's just that you get older and the demographic seems to be getting younger and younger that's going out.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, I think the Valley has changed, and I don't necessarily think it's changed for the better, but I don't want to sound like one of those cranky old men. But, no, we had a good gig the other night, actually. We actually worked a bit hard leading up to it for once in our life and actually did a couple of proper rehearsals leading up to it. So we were played pretty well actually, and gave a new song a bit of a going over. So at the moment, basically, I'm just writing. We're trying to rehearse to try to basically get a few new songs going for later in the year, basically. Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So for people listening, how can they get in touch with you and find your music?
Probably the easiest way is just to jump on the old Facebook, and I think if you just put in Leichhardt with the double H, you should find us there. And but you can just Google it, and I think it's for sale. The album's for sale through Plus One. You know, there's Sonic Records, Sonic Sherpa.
Okay.
Sorry, you know, it's Stone's Corner there, the record shop. Simon.
Sorry, you're talking about the physical copy. Yes, cool. Yep.
Yeah, physical copies. You can get that, you know, because Simon put it out, helped us out. Simon Homer helped us out there at Plus One, so he's got a few. But probably the easiest way is just Facebook, you know, and then get in contact there. And there's a few photos, and I think a couple of live clips and things like that. And that's probably the easiest way.
Cool. Interestingly, it might be interesting for you to know, actually, most of my listenership is in North America. So that's,
okay.
I'm very keen, especially God, man, I think I can tell you, I can count on one hand. I've done almost 300 interviews at this point, and on one hand, I can tell you is the amount of bands that I've spoken to that are from Brisbane, from where I'm from. You know, and it's incredible the way things have worked out, but it's just, I know they're out there, believe me, and big champion of bands from our part of the world, you know, Sunshine Coast, Brisbane and Gold Coast bands, all Queensland bands, but it's just rare that the opportunity comes up, so it's always a thrill, mate.
No, very good. Excellent.
Cool. All right, well, that's it. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast. My name is Andrew Mackay-Smith, and that was my conversation with Liam Bray, a member of the band from Brisbane called Leichhardt. Thank you so much for listening.